Good to be here once again. Very good to be here. This is another Tuesday for a core teaching in my area of specialization, philosophy of religion and theology. My name is Josephine, the digital educator for learnwithjoes, and this is an academy of knowledge economy. I'm continuing today with what we call theistic arguments, but looking at divine foreknowledge and human freedom. I've explained to you in the past Tuesdays what is theism, what is atheism. I've given you the general overview of concept of God. Last Tuesday, I taught on theistic concept of God. But today, I'm teaching on divine foreknowledge and human freedom. So before I continue, let's join learnwithjoes. Yeah, I welcome to the second Tuesday of the month of May, 2023. And this is learnwithjoes, an academy of knowledge economy. And I'm teaching today on divine foreknowledge and human freedom. My name, once again, is Josephine, the digital educator for learnwithjoes. You know, in all my presentations, either the teachings on Tuesdays or even Friday, where I discuss important lessons of life that I call Friday Tonic, I want to present PowerPoint presentation for you to follow me, right? And I've always given you the reason why I do that. Because of cultural differences in pronunciation, in diction, and everything. I don't want an excuse for anybody saying, oh, what is the digital professor saying? I didn't hear how well or something like that. But when you see what I'm talking about, then you understand what is following the principle of this channel, which we know as knowledge economy, for in-depth understanding of any issue we present out. So hold on while I show you the PowerPoint presentation for today's teaching. Like I said, I'm teaching on divine knowledge and human freedom. Don't forget, my doctorate degree is in philosophy of religion and theology. And there might be other views from other disciplines, scientific principles or whatever. Well, I am speaking from the view of philosophy of religion. So I want you to take note of that as we continue. I want you also to take this picture or graphic as an abstract, ponder on it, look at it thoroughly. What does he tell you about divine knowledge and human freedom? What's this card that is tied down to something that could be moved? What is he saying? I want you to have that graphic in your mind as you follow me in today's teachings. Arguments that purport to demonstrate some internal transitional doctrines of orthodox theism are often of great interest to reflective theists, because even if they fail to prove that theism is incoherent, as atheists or the atheists sort out their theological commitments. Often a debate demonstrates the need for some development or nuance of one's views. Various solutions to the problem are proposed, each having a significant implications for one brother's theology. Some implications are desirable, some are not desirable. Thus, one must make a careful cost analysis in choosing which to accept. I want you to know this is a free world. We have free choice. But in using your free will to make a choice, you need to look at everything thoroughly. Because wherever you choose to believe or follow, you can't blame anybody. It's just your own choice. So such is the case with the debate over the relationship between divine foreknowledge and human freedom. The doctrine of divine omniscience typically implies that God foreknowledge, that is knowledge of future events. Few will deny that God knows some future events. Of course, he knows that the sun will rise tomorrow. But more generally, it is uncontroversial that God's knowledge extends to any future event that is casually or causally determined to occur. What is disputed is whether God possesses knowledge of the free choices that humans and any other free creatures of God might make in the future. It is often alleged that if he did, such knowledge will undermine the freedom of those choices. So consequently, divine foreknowledge and human freedom are what? Incompatible. They're incompatible. That's what they're saying. Why is it thought that freedom will be undermined by God's knowledge in advance? The choice that someone will make. A common way of looking at this about is, suppose God knows that, let's say we have a man known as or called Mr. Smith. And Mr. Smith has in his mind that he will want to make a phone call to his wife tomorrow at noon. That's the requirement of his freedom, that he can make he can freely choose. So for Smith to act freely, it must be that there's more than one thing that he can do. That is, at that noon, there are so many other things Smith can do, but he has chosen to call his wife at noon. So just if Smith is too free in calling his wife tomorrow at noon, it must be within his power not to call his wife at noon. What I'm saying is that if it is within his power to call his wife at noon, then it might be within his will not to call his wife at noon. He can still call his wife at any other time. But if God knows that Smith will call his wife, then given that God's knowledge is infallible, there really is only one thing that Smith can possibly do at noon tomorrow. And that thing is call his wife. Since it is not really within Smith's power not to call. So he does not act freely when he calls. And the same goes for every supposedly free choice that any one of us might make if God foreknew it. Then it was not really free. After all, instead, it occurred of necessity. As it turns out, this line of reasoning is flawed. Though it's flawed, and I tell you why it's flawed. Though the fallacy of it commits is subtle, it's very, very subtle. The mistake lies in thinking that God's knowledge that Smith will call his wife tomorrow at noon implies that it is necessary the Smith will call. That is impossible that he will not call at all at that time. So there's a crucial difference between these two propositions. The first proposition, necessarily, if God knows that Smith will call, then Smith will call. Two, if God knows that Smith will call, then necessarily Smith will call. Don't be confused. Those two propositions are not the same. One, necessarily, if God knows that Smith will call, then Smith will call. Two, if God knows that Smith will call, then necessarily Smith will call. I hope you are following what I'm saying. Okay? Now, proposition one, let's look at it thoroughly. It's true because truth is a conceptual requirement for knowledge. No one can know as opposed to merely believing anything false. But one is not strong enough to make the argument go through. The argument requires two. However, the problem with two is that if we think about it carefully, we find that there is no good reason to accept it. So it does not follow from one, and it seems prima facie implausible that mere knowledge of an event could cause or otherwise necessitate the event to occur. So the argument convincing as it might initially sound, is flawed. It turns out that there is a related argument for the incompatibility, divine foreknowledge, and human freedom. That while a bit kind of morally complicated, is much more difficult to refute. Suppose God has known for all eternity past that Smith will make a phone call to his wife tomorrow at noon. That is, even in the beginning, that so date, Mr. Smith is going to call his wife at noon. Again, it is a requirement of freedom that one possesses alternate possibilities. Thus, if Smith is free to call his wife tomorrow at noon, it must be within his power not to call his wife at noon. And yet, it appears that this is not really within Smith's power. So come noon tomorrow, were Smith not to make the call, one of two things will then happen. Either Smith will thereby at that moment falsify the belief that God has heard about him for all eternity past concerning what he will do at that time. Or Smith will thereby at that moment change the past concerning what God has always believed about him. So, example, Smith will bring it about that God has for eternity past always believed that Smith will not make the call at that time. I don't want us to be confused about this logical philosophical argument as it is unfolding. So, but both are impossible. God's foreknowledge is infallible, very highly infallible. God's foreknowledge, it cannot possibly be mistaken. So there is no evidence, there's no chance that Smith will falsify God's past beliefs about him when he acts tomorrow. He is a being that is lesser than God, and he cannot change whatever God knows. So it is equally impossible that Smith or anyone else can change the past, even contingent events. So once they have occurred, take on a kind of necessity. That is, if something occurred in the past, then it is now necessary that it occurred. It seems clear then that there's only one thing that Smith can do tomorrow at noon. And the same goes for every supposedly free choice that anyone ever makes. If God foreknew it, then it was not really free after all. Instead, it occurred out of necessity. So, it is a fundamental part of Orthodox theism that God is omniscient. Omniscience seems to imply foreknowledge. But it's equally a part of orthodoxy that God is just and holds human beings accountable for their actions. So it is just for God to do so only if we are responsible for our actions. But it seems clear that we are responsible only for our actions freely. So if divine foreknowledge undermines human freedom, then it seems to follow that God is unjust in holding us responsible for our actions. And God is a just God. It's not unjust. So in this way, the argument from foreknowledge seems to demonstrate an incompatibility between God's essential attributes, his omniscience and his justice. So debates of this kind have been the impetus for significant historical, theological developments and revisions to many individuals' personal religious views. There's much at stake here, very much at stake. There's different proposed solutions. Each have a significant implications for broader theology. It fits. So to learn more, I want you to check Contours of Christian Philosophy, that is Philosophy of Religion, 2nd edition, by C. Stephen Evans and R. Sakarimanis. Especially if you read the pages 42 to 52, you get more knowledge about what I've been trying to teach you now. Don't forget, Philosophy of Religion, 2nd edition, by C. Stephen Evans and R. Zachary Manus. From 42 to 52, the pages there, you will learn more about it. So, holding that God is a just God, then you will know divine knowledge, foreknowledge, should not undermine the free choice of us as rationally free creations of God. Join me on Friday for another interesting Friday tonic. I won't let the ball out of the bag now, but please call your family, to everybody, to join me on Friday. And next Tuesday, I'm going to continue on aspects of the theistic arguments. I love you all. Thank you for listening to me, for listening to my teaching. You can get more information either personally for me through check my description link for my contact details, my email, or you can contact me personally. I appreciate you all. I appreciate you all. Have a very blessed week.